Okay, so as you're very much aware, I don't do any of the art for this channel. Most of my main art assets have been done by the artist formerly known as Felene, and all the recent art on this channel has been done by my friend PraiseCastiel. What you might not know, however, is that I actually do have my own art. Well, maybe you do know I have my own art. I did just recently tweet out a set of images showing off a 3D model I made in TAFE a few years back. Anyway, despite my lack of skills or discipline, I do have a small stockpile of art. So I figured, hey, why don't I show off some of my horrible little graphite and ink creations? To start us off with, here's my first ever drawing I did outside of my high school art classes that I didn't completely hate. Manga and anime enthusiasts might recognize her as being the first face they teach you to draw in one of the old How to Draw Manga books. She didn't come out exactly as I hoped, and I think the original intent of the book was for the character to be a male, but I decided that she was a girl instead. Her name is Maxine, or Max for short, because it felt tomboyish, and well, I do like tomboys. Next up is something totally different and entirely unique within my art history. I'm sure you bookworms might recognize this creature as the Vral from Del Toro Quest. In high school I was really into the series, and when I found out my library had a copy of How to Draw Del Toro monsters, I just couldn't say no. I actually kept the book for about 2 months before returning it for good, and this was all I ended up doing between playing games and watching cartoons. Sometimes I think having it left incomplete makes it look worse than if I had finished it and the proportions were all completely off. Still, I was a lot more driven back then to draw than I am now, so props to dipshit teenage me for trying it all. These two are my follow-up attempts at drawing faces. The purple hair girl was a design from the book, but I think the other one was entirely original. I honestly can't remember. Anyway, this was when I realized the whole symmetry thing was a real pain in the ass. Still, I quite liked how they came out considering I had basically no skill and virtually no prior experience of drawing at the time. I named them Bianca and Kat, undoubtedly after the sisters from one of my favourite movies, 10 Things I Hate About You. Fun fact, an artist over on DeviantArt actually asked for permission to draw these two lovely ladies. I have no idea why, and I have no idea if they'll ever follow through on doing so, but it was a very surprising and exciting thing to happen. I've always hoped people will like my characters enough to do art of them, but I never expected it to happen to these gals. And Quinella, if by some twist of fate you are watching this video, I'm still looking forward to seeing what you produce if you do end up drawing these girls, even if it has been 3 years. Trailing through the tail end of high school, I barely drew anything as I threw myself more into writing in my spare time, namely because I could get away with doing it in class a lot easier. Still, I wasn't entirely without inspiration for drawing. In that time, I produced a whole series of pendant and sword designs, based on the Kingdom Hearts concept of the keyblade and keychains. Why did I do this? Simple, because a friend of mine and I had gotten the grand idea of designing our own version of Kingdom Hearts, but with worlds based on anime and book series rather than Disney movies. These are the only 2 designs I ever did in my sketchbook, let alone coloured and uploaded to the internet. So why Pendants and Swords? Well, I know a functional system when I see one, and figured knocking it off a little wouldn't be that bad considering we intended to make a full-blown game at the time. Suffice to say though, we did eventually get too distracted by other things and ended up losing our notebook of plans and ideas. Probably for the best, really. Could you imagine how expensive it would be to produce a game like that? The licensing costs alone would be enough to scare off even the richest investors. But at least I still have all my weapon designs. Somewhere. Moving on, and jumping ahead some amount of time, we come to one of the last times I drew something I was honestly satisfied with. These weapons here, the Battle Scythe and Lunar Crescent, were the original 2 weapons used by my primary character on a Final Fantasy VIII alternate universe roleplay forum. I actually recently quit that forum after being a part of it for about 14 years. I'm going to miss the place, but thankfully a fellow member, Tonkatsu, who did a lot of art for the site, was gracious enough to send me all the images he had in his archives of my 2 characters, so I'll never be without memories of the place. You guys should also totally go check out his DeviantArt, link in the description. We're going into the final stretch here folks, with only 3 pieces of art to show. It's not my entire collection of course, but if I showed you everything, what motivation would there be for you to go and check out my DeviantArt yourselves? So in for a bit of a quickfire round here, this is the Eye of Epsilon. If you're familiar with my writings and rambles, you will know that Epsilon is one of my more odd characters. There isn't a lot of cemented lore about him floating around, and the few bits of art there are of him are currently outdated designs. The most notable thing about them is that they are lacking this second segmented pupil that rings around his regular pupil. That is mostly because I didn't ask for it to be included, since it is such a minute detail, and I didn't want to put any more stress on the artist than I already had. That said, this is the oldest canonical piece of his appearance I ever decided upon and kept. I've been meaning to trace over it or recreate it digitally, but I still can't use a tablet to save my life. In second place is my only existing full body art, until recently anyway. This simple looking character is Hal, which is short for Halloween, because he is meant to be the spirit of the holiday. Though he did spend a short time as a tiefling son of a succubus in my first ever attempt to DM a game of Pathfinder. Of course he has the edgy weapon selection of a scythe, something I used to have a bad habit of being very into the idea of, but I since upgraded him to a large axe or halberd, complete with a jack-o'-lantern design worked into the axe head. I had a few ideas for him back when I first made him, but I never really ended up using him outside of a couple attempts to make Pathfinder adventures. Now, last but not least, my most recent piece of artwork, this guy. You remember how I got super into Monster Prom, made a let's play of it, and proceeded to still be super into Monster Prom? Well, I finally decided to make a Monster Sona for the fandom. I haven't named him yet or spent more time working on the design, but as you can see he is a Naga, or a Lamia if we want to be otakus about it. He has also a demon for the extra arms and the horns. Sadly, this might be the way he'll stay for a while unless I can find the drive to improve my skills. Still, I'm glad I managed to draw anything at all after all these years. So that's it, show's over folks. If you want to see more of my art, I recommend checking out my DeviantArt account. There is a link in the description. I really need to update the gallery with more of my old artworks, but I hope you enjoy what I have in there already. If you want to know more about anything I talked about in this video, just drop a comment below or tweet me at the Midnight Pint. As always, any and all feedback is appreciated, and if you want to help support me, I have both a tip jar on Patreon and a community Discord. Again, links in the description. And until next time, cheers.